Well, we just heard outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid giving what could be his last national address as premier. I would even describe it maybe as his first speech as head of the opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu's incoming government. It was a blistering attack on that government from basically every angle, describing, of course, how the opposition is going to fight against it. With me in studio to break it down, we have Yariv Oppenheimer, project director of the two-state coalition Geneva Initiative. He's a former member of the Meretz Executive Committee. And also joining us from Jerusalem is Yehuda Glick, former Israeli parliament member from Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party. And Yehuda, I'm going to let you go first. Outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid said this new government is a garage sale of Israeli democracy. It's going to weaken the military, weaken the economy, weaken Israel's ties with the U.S., with world Jewry. Quote, a recipe for disaster. Your response to that?
First of all, shalom to you and to my dear friend Yariv Oppenheimer. I'm very happy to be here on I-24. And I want to say that Mr. Lapid gave his speech, his first speech as the leader of the opposition, and he did what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to attack the government and criticize it as bitterly as possible. But the facts are that the government that is being established is the government that was elected by the mass majority of the people of Israel. And as a matter of fact, if many of the parties that are decided to be in the opposition have an open door to join the coalition, they decided to ban the mass majority of the people of Israel. So they chose to be in the opposition.
Okay, but
the opposition is very easy to yell and scream and criticize. In the coalition and the government, you have to do. And I hope this government finally, after 3 years of a long election campaign, will finally function.
Right, but I'm asking you, do you think his points about the government were legitimate or not?
Look, when he tries to delegitimize the government, he's wrong. When he wants to criticize the government, that's what he's supposed to do. And I can say many of the things he may have said, I can agree partly, but I think the government has a majority, and they have a right to lead the majority. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu right now has a full support from every one of his partners.
All right, Yariv, your response both to what outgoing Premier Yair Lapid said and Yehuda's perspective.
I have to tell you honestly that I think Lapid was too polite. I think the situation is much worse than what Lapid said. We see now the agreement between the Likud party and the other parties. We see death penalty. We see opening the door to racist parties to run in the Israeli election. Things that we never thought will be part of the political climate in this country. And this is not just governing. This is changing the rules of the game. This is changing Israel from democracy to post-democracy. This is creating a new system that is undemocratic. Look what they are trying to do and what they are aiming to do to the Supreme Court, to make it impossible to Israelis to come and to say the majority is taking the right of the minority. This is the role of the Supreme Court, and they are trying to weaken it and to make it actually without any ability to be effective. So in democracy, it's election, it's the rule of it's the majority count, but it's also the rights of the minority. You cannot use the votes of the majority in order to take the rights from the minority. And this is what we are talking about. We are talking about gay rights. We are talking about women's rights. We are talking about the Palestinians. We are talking about refugees. Today it was exposed again that refugees can be locked in jail without trial, something that no democratic country can do. So every few hours we are getting new promises that Netanyahu made to his partners that are totally not part of a democratic regime. So this is almost a coup against democracy.
Well, okay, I want to have you. I want to let you to respond. I just want to ask you about how you feel about the description of this government as extremist, which is a term that's been used by some to describe yourself, Yehuda.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can hear the hysterical response of my dear friend Yariv Oppenheimer. And I truly recommend to him to change his perspective. And nobody moved your cheese. Nobody stole the government. The government is now leading by its principles. And the fact that for so many years, so many people on the left think that it's impossible that anybody who has different opinions of their own is against democracy.
Mr.
And everybody
Glick,
who
Mr.
thinks
Glick,
differently...
Are you in favor of death penalty in Israel? Do you like to see electric chairs in the Israeli jail? This is something that you support because this is part of the agreement. Are you in favor of taking down the bill that is saying that a racist party cannot run for the election? Are you in favor that racist party will be able to run in the election? This is something that was published. Don't talk about slogans. Talk about these specific issues.
I'll answer directly to those two questions. I would prefer to live in a country where there's no death penalty. But I would also prefer to live in a country where people don't shoot with machine guns at buses and at restaurants. And when they're talking about death penalty, they're talking about something very, very, very serious. The United States has death penalty, which I don't like, and they use it very openly. But if in Israel we don't use, that's where you're reaching a point where you're taking things to the wrong point. And the same thing happens with the other question you asked me. I don't want this country to be a racist country. But when you see the Supreme Court again and again allows racist parties from the Palestinian parties who are totally racist
They're
to
not
run.
racist. They're not against Jews. Show me one quote of these people against Jews. And I can show you plenty of quotes about Palestinians and Arabs. But you are not saying the right thing.
Let Yehuda finish his point.
Yariv, I have a right to speak even though I'm from the right. Mm-hmm. And the right are always right and the left are just to the left. What can I do? That's what we have left. But let me tell you, Yariv, again, when the Supreme Court uses again and again the law against racism only one direction, it means that this law is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So let me say very simple. You, Yariv, and many of your friends who have wrongly used the Supreme Court and turned it into a political tool are the ones who weakened the Supreme Court. And today, when the right-wing government wants to strengthen the Supreme Court and put limitations and say the Supreme Court should use and be a Supreme Court and not be a political court, this is...
The Supreme Court is a political court because it makes a political decision, and the reason why we have a Supreme Court is to limit the power of the majority. The Supreme Court doesn't supposed to be a popular thing because it's going to, if it's strong and it's doing its job, it needs to be against the will of the majority. It needs to represent the minority. This is why I think we don't use enough the Supreme Court until today. And what they are trying to do is to make it even weaker and to make it impossible for the minority to protect itself. So tomorrow morning, Yehuda Glick can say that everything is nice and he loves everyone, but eventually the government that he supports, and I'm not supporting, is trying to silence and to make it almost impossible to speak. They are already talking about new laws that will limit their freedom of speech, the freedom of NGOs to act in Israel. It's exactly like a non-democratic party. This is a coup against democratic regime. And I thought, maybe I'm naive, that people like Yehuda Glick will say, we went too far. This is too far. Okay. Netanyahu come back to be a national leader and not a fascist.
Yariv Oppenheimer, Yehuda, I want to give you a chance to respond. We have to go to a break. Please stay with us, but we'll come back and you will have a chance to respond to Yariv. Welcome back to the Rundown. We're just minutes after outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid delivering a blistering attack on the incoming government of Benjamin Netanyahu, calling it, quote, a garage sale for democracy and a recipe for disaster. Still with us in studio, Yariv Oppenheimer, project director of the two-state coalition, Geneva Initiative, and joining us from Jerusalem, former parliament member of the Likud, Yehuda Glick. And Yehuda, I want you to respond. Yariv did speak, saying this incoming government is looking to silence dissent, to silence minority rights in this country. Your response to that?
Look, I really think that I don't want to refer to every single specific claim that Yariv has. I want to recommend Yariv, and I also want to recommend Yair Lapid the same thing. There's a new government. It has a policy. It has values that it believes in. You can agree with them. You cannot agree with them. They are the government. Give them a chance. Respect that their values are values that they believe in and are legitimate, just like your own. Don't immediately try to automatically disagree. Think out of the box.
Yehuda,
Be a little bit more constructive.
This is not out
Give
of the
them a
box.
chance,
This is out
and
of
maybe,
democracy.
And maybe,
This
Yariv,
is
and
what they are promising to the
maybe
other
what you'll
parties
find
is
out-
non-democratic
maybe you'll find out
state.
surprisingly.
We are facing a non-democratic
Maybe you will
state. This
find
is
out
not a policy
surprisingly
issue. This is the basic
Maybe you will-
instrument of
maybe-
Israel.
Yariv, the most important thing is let people speak. Maybe you will see that other people's opinions also have a right side to them. Give a chance and stop immediately thinking that somebody
Yehuda,
who
briefly,
thinks different
what do you think will be the points of agreement here between you and Yariv, for example, in this new government?
I think that there are not many things that Yariv agrees with this government. I can definitely hope that this government will, for instance, do what I'm right now working on, support widows and orphan families in Israel. I hope Yariv can agree to that. I can tell you that, this week we're giving out 2,000 packages of light to widows and orphan children.
Honestly, I used to not to agree with the Israeli government. Usually I'm not agreeing with the Israeli government. It's not a problem. This is not about policy. This is about the basic elements of democracy. This is about democracy, not about policy. And when this government is aiming fire over me and my friends and my allies in the Israeli political system that they don't think like you, and when they are trying to weaken the Supreme Court, and when they are trying to politicize the police.
Okay, we are
so
gentlemen.
I feel like I'm in here. This is serious stuff here.
I promise you, Yariv. Let me bet you that in 3 years from now, you will be surprised. You will be surprised at the success and the things that you will agree with this government.